Thank you everyone for joining the Toastmaster Relevation Program. I don't know what to say, evaluating advanced speakers by Dennis Dawson. The Toastmasters Revelation Program is an educational session hosted by Division D, which invites renowned Toastmasters in the Bay Area and around the world. Each session highlights the most transformational moments. The goal of the program is to provide a bridge to all our Toastmasters to apply these skills in their real life. Now that we all know what this program is about, let me introduce to you our Toastmaster of the day. He's a two-time DTM who has been a Toastmaster for almost 6 years now. He's currently a member of 4 clubs and the current president of the Cupertino Morning Masters. He's someone who believes in education and often delivers the Toastmasters educational workshop very regularly and will almost hit 1,000 workshop attendees over 2 years by December of 2020. He is none other than Declan Shalvey. Over to you, Declan.
Thank you very much, Raji, for that generous and warm introduction. Now that we got those pleasantries out of the way, I have got some good news and some bad news about Dennis Dawson that I want to share with you. And being Irish, I want to celebrate the negative and I want to give you the bad news first. Over his lifetime, Dennis Dawson has denied hairdressers and barbers the right to a livelihood. He will not trim those locks if anybody's life depends upon it. The good news is that Dennis has invested significant amount of his time in Toastmasters. He is a 2-time Toastmaster. He's been in Toastmasters some 13 years. He's been a past district director. He's held area director roles and many other leadership roles. I know him more recently through his presidential role in San Jose Toastmasters. During that time, he has invested, as I said, in learning the skills of Toastmastering and communication. But what makes him exceptional, in my opinion, is his generosity in sharing what he knows and what he has learned. Today is no exception. Dennis is hosting a workshop on how to evaluate advanced speakers. He is providing immeasurable benefit to those of us who want to become better at speaking. And of course, the evaluation process is the fundamental learning mechanism within Toastmasters. I would like to introduce Dennis Dawson, the leader of our workshop today.
Thank you, Declan. Welcome, everyone. I have to say, I come to this topic today very humbly. I see many luminaries, people whose skills I admire in the audience today. Forgive my hubris, but when Gavin asked me to give this talk, I was intrigued and I jumped at the chance. You see, I have a confession. I am an advanced speaker. I've won district contests. I've given over 100 evaluated speeches based on lessons in Toastmasters materials. I even give workshops like the one I'm giving right now. But if I'm such toast with awesome sauce, why am I still a Toastmaster? The same reason as all of you, to continually improve my communication and leadership skills. Using Malcolm Gladwell's chart of skill mastery, we tend to build skills very quickly when we start out. After that, the progress is more gradual. But it's still important. So I hope you'll understand then how frustrating it can be for an advanced speaker to hear an evaluator say, "Oh my, you're just so good. I don't know what to say." Folks, no one is a perfect speaker. I'm far from it. I want to grow. It's your responsibility to help me continually improve. You need to step up and give me useful, constructive feedback, and I'll do the same for you. So today, I want to spend about 20 minutes talking about giving feedback that's focused on the speaker's needs. I'll talk about how you can go to a deeper level to give more nuanced feedback. And I'll talk about the importance of giving honest, empathetic feedback. Then we'll have 3 test speakers, and I'll walk through the process of choosing the criteria I'll use when I would deliver their evaluations. So let's begin by empathizing with the speaker. Evaluations are the heart of Toastmasters. They're the core of the education program. And evaluations are how we show that we care for each other. Now, if you're worried about how you're going to evaluate a speaker, it's because you're focused on yourself. You're worried about being too critical. You're worried about sounding dumb. You're worried about what others will think of you or what the speaker will think of you. Now, you can easily move past these feelings if you remember that the evaluation isn't about you. Focus on the speaker's growth. Think about how you're going to help the speaker, not about yourself. You see, in Toastmasters, we rise. That's an acronym from our 4 governing principles: respect, integrity, service, and excellence. We show respect. We show respect for the educational program. Yes, that means we respect the new Pathways program and all its lessons. We follow the rules and create an environment that allows everyone to achieve their communication and leadership goals, resulting in greater confidence and self-respect. But remember that respect is a two-way street. Respect yourself. Your observations matter. You can always tell any speaker what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt while they were speaking. That feedback is always useful and appreciated as long as you're honest and observant. Respect the speaker. The speaker has had the temerity to prepare a speech and deliver it to your club. The speaker deserves to receive a thoughtful evaluation. And by the way, if the speaker obviously hasn't prepared well, they deserve an evaluation about that too. In one of my home clubs, I was assigned as an evaluator to a longtime member. I asked what lesson he was using. He said none. He had the infamous yellow sticky note in his right hand. He was going to give a 4 to 6 minute speech about what Toastmasters means to me. He'd done a speech like this before, and the club said it was okay. He then got up and gave a rambling, less than coherent table topic that lasted about 3 minutes. I did not hold back in his evaluation. I took him to task for stealing a valuable speaking slot from someone who could have used it to advance in the Pathways program. I took him to task for not preparing, but mostly I took him to task for his disrespect of the educational program, his fellow members, and the Toastmasters organization itself. The club was aghast. I continued. I apologized to him for the club letting him down, allowing him to be in the club for years without building his skills. I assured him that we all love him, want him to succeed, and promised we would do better to help him reach his goals. Now, shocking as it was a growth moment for the club. I wasn't kicked out of the club. In fact, I became the club president. My friend didn't quit. He's now engaged in Pathways and showing improvement. And no member has given a speech outside the Pathways curriculum since that day. I could have just let it go. But for me, it was a question of integrity. Do I want to be part of a club where members don't work the program? No. If I don't like this chapter, I literally have over 16,000 other clubs to choose from now that we're all meeting online. I act with integrity in all things. I try to be truthful and be honest. You need to be kind, express our opinions with affection, but don't shy away from saying what needs to be said. Toastmasters is an organization that teaches leadership skills, but not just any sort of leadership. We champion servant leadership. You're here to provide service to your fellow members. When I was district governor, it meant that I turned on the lights in the morning, and then I picked up the trash and turned off the lights in the evening. Leadership isn't about notoriety or glamour. It's working to help others have fun and achieve their goals. One important service we all provide one another is thoughtful feedback. We are what we do regularly, and therefore, excellence is a habit. We want all speeches to be excellent. We're not preparing to talk to 10 people in the back of a Denny's. We're preparing to give TED Talk. We're preparing to give keynote speeches at professional conferences. Give feedback as if you're helping the next world champion of public speaking. And one of these days, you might be right. Never doubt that you're ready to evaluate any speaker. You have a right to express what you see, hear, and feel when a speaker's presenting. You can't be wrong when you're just stating what you observed. You have a responsibility to give excellent feedback as a member of your club, and you have a duty to deliver feedback that gives encouragement, helps the speaker grow, and is edifying for everyone present. You know that you're tasked with giving helpful feedback now, but when you're evaluating an experienced speaker, you'll evaluate them based on the same criteria as anyone else, but now you'll have to take a more nuanced approach. Believe it or not, the best way to start with an advanced speaker is to ask yourself how they did with the basics. In Toastmasters, we first learn the mechanics of how to create an effective presentation. After that, we use those skills to achieve particular results, to inspire, to persuade, or to entertain the audience. The rules that we learn early on are meant to be broken as we progress and experiment with different formats and intentions. Ask 2 questions. Did the speaker follow the basic rules of presentations? And where they broke the rules, was it intentional and effective? Answer those questions, and you'll have a ready-made evaluation, finding areas to praise and areas for improvement. Remember that there are no free speeches. Every speech has a lesson in the Pathways program. Experienced speakers are often less likely to pay attention to the requirements for a particular lesson. So read the criteria. Talk to the speaker about what they want you to focus on, and then consider both in your evaluation. And that will usually give you plenty to talk about. To my personal shame, when I completed my first path, I prepared a 5 to 7 minute speech where I reflected on my journey. I had a fancy video Zoom background to go with it. The speech was really well received. Now, in that same meeting, another speaker reflected on her path. She gave an 8 to 10 minute speech per the lesson guideline. I was awarded the best speaker of the day, but I didn't accept it because I hadn't followed the lesson. I redid the speech at another club, properly following the guideline. Distinguished Toastmaster, DTM, has to stand for something. Otherwise, DTM is don't time me or didn't take much. I need to be held accountable to my Toastmasters commitments as much or more so than other members. Now, this is the grid I use for capturing notes during an evaluation. I make a column for positives and a column for negatives. In the rows, I list what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt. I put my comments into the category boxes as I listen to the speech, doing my best to capture the specific wording where possible so I can quote it in my evaluation. Now, you don't have to give a laundry list of all the things that were done well or need improvement. When evaluating an experienced speaker, look at your notes and pull out the most unique or significant areas. Try to surprise the speaker with your insights rather than fall back on Toastmasters tropes. Pick 2 things that the speaker did well. Try to find one that's going to transition nicely from the second point into a third point, which is something that could have been even better. At most, give 1 more suggestion for improvement, then transition to the one thing the speaker did best of all. If I don't have time to write out the evaluation, what I do is add numbers to my notes that tell me how I should move between my comments. So looking here, I would probably start out with, I enjoyed the voices that you used. They were very distinct and it was easy to follow the characters. I also liked the faces and the expressions you used to show us the different characters. It really enhanced the speech for me. But speaking of the physical properties, I'd have to say that I noticed your hands were above your waist the entire time. You never dropped them and relaxed. I also noticed that you clasped them when you were nervous. And then many times your gestures were mirrors, where you moved both your hands at the same time as if you were split down the middle in a mirror. Sometimes it's nice to vary your gestures by using one hand or the other, and certainly dropping your hands when they're not in use. But your hands did something important. They helped me to visualize the picture, and I was touched by the story of your kitten with its crooked paw. That really brought the message of your story home to me, and therefore I was able to enjoy your speech. There we go. So I went from the positives on the left, transitioned to 3 and 4 on the right, and came around to the thing that I liked best of all about that speech. Now, if you ever plan to participate in an evaluation contest, always prepare your evaluations in the club as if you were in a contest. Now that means having a clear introduction and conclusion with smooth transitions between each section. In this case, I might have started the evaluation with a short poem. The fact is that no one likes a cat, but many are smitten with the kitten. The conclusion then, after talking about the kitten with the crooked paw, might be, I appreciated your thoughtful and touching speech and am even more smitten with you as a result. Toastmaster. Something along that line gives a nice bookending to your evaluation, turns it into more of a speech and performance and not just a simple evaluation. Be mindful of your time. We never want to go over time in Toastmasters, that's disrespectful. But particularly if you're preparing for contests, understand that when you see that yellow card, that's the time that you begin your summary. One of my favorite Toastmasters had excellent feedback in a recent contest and probably lost by going 2 or maybe 3 seconds over time. It's not all right to go over time in the meeting, but it's deadly to go over time in a contest. I won't have time to craft the evaluations I'll do later today in quite this way, but I'll try to come up with the hook that I might use if I had more time. So we know we have to give feedback, but most importantly, when you're evaluating an advanced speaker, you have to provide honest feedback. It has to be based on your honest reaction to the speech you just heard. Don't fall into the trap of evaluating the advanced speaker based on other speeches you've seen. The only one that matters is the speech they gave today. It's not a summation of an illustrious career. This is particularly applicable when the speaker fails to follow or meet the requirements of the Pathways lesson. I once called out a past international director for trying to recite a poem when it was clear not only had he not practiced enough, he didn't even understand some of the lines that he was saying. It doesn't matter if you've been a speaker at the Commonwealth Club in the past. I'm evaluating your speech today, and I'll point it out if you miss the mark. I recently discovered the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Sometimes you read a book and you're amazed at the new ideas, things you never thought of. Well, that's not the case here for me. I recognized and resonated with the Candor Compass instantly because I learned about it from experience. The Candor Compass has 4 arrows. Horizontally, you have a continuum of remaining silent to offering directly challenging feedback. Vertically, you have a continuum from utter apathy to caring deeply. Some people think that love is the opposite of hate, but that's not true. There's actually just a fine line between the two. The opposite of love is not caring, and that can be devastating. If you don't care about a speaker and you challenge her directly, that's not radical candor, that's being a jerk. Obnoxious aggression. Don't confirm the two. Don't ever use radical candor as an excuse to be a jerk to people. But if you're not practicing radical candor, this is probably the second best choice because at least you're giving useful feedback, even if you're not doing it in the most positive way possible. If you don't care and you don't give useful feedback, you'll just say pleasant little nothings or nothing at all. That's insincere manipulation. You might say one thing in your evaluations, but secretly talk smack behind the person's back. Well, that's no way to build trust with the speaker. It's also no way to build trust with the people you're talking smack with. They'll assume you talk the same way about them when they're not around, because you do. And you know you do, don't you? Don't you? Yes. So let's show that we care, shall we? Caring is important. But we also must challenge the speaker. Otherwise, we'll indulge in the most insidious of the misguided feedback, perhaps the most harmful of all, ruinous empathy, sparing someone's feelings at the expense of growth. I see this particularly with non-native English speakers. We're so busy dancing around issues of pronunciation and grammar that we give false encouragement. We say that they're doing so much better than they actually are. That can make a person confident, full of self-esteem, and not very good. We have to show the courage to give honest feedback, or there can be no growth. Radical candor is caring personally while challenging directly. At its core, radical candor is guidance and feedback that's both kind and clear, specific and sincere, honest and loving. If you appreciate something the speaker did, talk about it specifically and why you found it effective. A good evaluation doesn't have to be critical. It can be positive if you take the time to give examples rather than use superlatives. Talk to my friend Solarzar. He has an excellent presentation about removing all the superlatives from our evaluations. When I read the book, Radical Candor, I recognize compassionate candor because I've already been using it and have been for over a decade. In 2010, I was one of the founding members of the Prep Squad. We're an advanced Toastmasters club where we prepare for contest speeches, speaking opportunities outside of Toastmasters, and workshops like the one I'm giving today. We started as a group of friends who wanted to give excellent feedback. We typically have someone deliver a 5 to 7 minute speech, then we spend an hour giving round-robin feedback. We're not polite and we don't wait our turn. If someone makes a suggestion and we disagree strongly, we'll say so. Or if a suggestion sparks another idea, we'll break in and build on one another. This method is far more effective than making everyone hold their thought until it's their turn to speak. We give blunt, fair, and direct criticism. In order to give and take that level of feedback, we have to know we're dealing with someone we trust, someone we love, someone we know is on our side and trying to help us do our best. In order for someone to become a member of our club, they have to attend a meeting where they give a speaker feedback. The next month, they come back, deliver a speech, and receive an hour's worth of feedback. After that, the club members vote. The member must receive unanimous acceptance in order to become a member. To the uninitiated guest, it can seem like we're rude, angry, or upset with one another, but no. We can say what needs to be said, we can make raucous jokes, we can stick a pin in each other's egos. Not only can we tolerate that, it actually makes our bond stronger because we know it all comes from a good place. Our club is small, not because we don't want to add members, but because we seldom find candidates who are a good fit. What we'd like to see is more clubs like ours that provide honest and direct feedback in an atmosphere of compassion and sincere devotion to one another. If you're interested in forming such a club, feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you get started. So that sets us up for kind of an exciting little exercise for me. We're going to bring up 3 speakers, one at a time, and after each speech, I'll walk you through the notes that I've taken and give you an idea of how I would put the evaluation together. I'm not going to spend 5 minutes off to the side and then come back and deliver the evaluation because that would take too much time. So as long as I've set the ground rules, I'm going to jump right in. And David Way, are you ready?
I am.
Great. David Way, Graham's number, David Way.
What is the largest number in the world? When I was 4, I knew the answer. It's 100. But as I grew older, I realized there is no such thing as a large number. Numbers are infinite. And on that day, mathematics sort of lost a bit of its sparkle. Well, today I'm going to try to recapture some of that by talking about one of the largest numbers ever conceived, Graham's number. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. David, this is an evaluation workshop, not a math class. So I hear you. I'm going to start off with something very small, like 3 plus 3. Now, when mathematicians first came up with this, they thought, this is great. We can now add any 2 numbers we want together. But wait, what happens if we wanted to add 3 numbers together? Then we'd have to use this really ugly notation, 3 plus 3 plus 3. If only we had a way to represent repeated addition. And some mathematician in the back raised his hand and said, guys, I just came up with this new thing. It's called multiplication, and it means repeated addition. So instead of doing 3 plus 3 plus 3, you can just write 3 times 3. And the mathematicians rejoiced. This is great. Now we can multiply any 2 numbers we want together. But wait, what if we wanted to multiply 3 numbers together? Then we'd have to use this really ugly notation, 3 times 3 times 3. If only we had a way to represent repeated multiplication. And somebody in the back raised his hand and said, guys, I came up with this new thing. It's called exponents. So instead of writing 3 plus 3, 3 times 3 times 3, you can just write 3 to the 3. And the mathematicians rejoiced again. This is great. We can now exponentiate any 2 numbers we want together. But wait, what if we wanted to exponentiate 3 numbers? Then we'd have to use this ugly notation again. If only there was a way we could represent repeated exponentiation. And about at this time, one mathematician just went, guys, okay, stop right there. This is literally going to take forever. So I've solved this problem and I've come up with one new notation called arrow notation. Now, how does arrow notation work? Well, 3 arrow 3 is the same thing as exponents. So this is equal to 3 to the 3, which is equal to 27. If you want to do repeated exponentiation, just add another arrow. 3 double arrow 3 is the same thing as 3 to the 3 to the 3, or about 7.6 trillion. But we don't have to stop there, because what if you wanted to do repeated exponentiation? Well, just add another arrow. 3 triple arrow 3 is equal to 3 to the 3 to the 3, and so on and so forth. How many 3s are stacked on top of each other? Well, there's about 7.6 trillion of them. But we don't have to stop there either, because what if you wanted to do repeated exponentiation? Well, just add another arrow. 3 4 arrows 3. That's the same thing as 3 to the 3 and so on and so forth. How many 3s do we have stacked up there? Well, 3 triple arrow 3 of them. And this, ladies and gentlemen, finally is the first step to calculating Graham's number. Now, 3 4 arrows 3 is kind of a mouthful, so I'm going to give it a nickname. I'm going to call it G1. I'm going to find another number, G2. What is G2? Well, G2 is 3 arrow, arrow, dot, 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 arrow, arrow, 3. How many arrows do we have in between the 3s? Well, there's G1 of them. But I'm not done yet, because I'm going to find another number, G3. What is G3? Well, G3 is 3 arrow, arrow, dot, 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 arrow, arrow, 3. How many arrows are between those 3s? Well, there are G2 of them. The pattern kind of goes on and on and on for a while until finally we get to G64, which is Graham's number. Now, this number is indescribably large. The number to tell you the number of digits this number has is itself indescribable. I mean, it took me 5 minutes of speaking just to give you some vague sense of how large it is. But you want to know what? There are numbers larger than Graham's number. Easy one, Graham's number plus 1 is larger than Graham's number. Graham's number times 2, Graham's number to the third power. Heck, if you wanted to go completely insane, you could take the formula that we used to get Graham's number and replace every single one of these 3s with Graham's number, and you'd get another mind-blowingly large number. All of these numbers, these insanely large numbers that we collectively, with our brain power, could not possibly imagine, is absolutely nothing compared to infinity. Isn't that amazing? Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Wonderful. Now, David, I am going to go down my 2 columns just to start with. What I saw were very good gestures. I appreciated your body language. I enjoyed the question you began with as far as hearing. That was amusing to think that the largest number in the world was 100. You could see a child saying that. One thing that I appreciated was I could feel your enthusiasm for mathematics. On the negative side, I found that your camera setting was too low, and I missed some of your gestures. They were actually below the eye range there. This particular speech could have used graphics. I had trouble keeping the images in my head of the various arrows, etc., that you were talking about. About halfway through the speech, I wasn't sure where you were headed. In fact, I had forgotten at that point that you were going to calculate Graham's numbers. And so I definitely could have used some graphics to follow along. Those are the things that I picked out. So if I were doing the evaluation at this point, I would definitely start with, I appreciated that question that you introduced at the beginning. I personally am not a mathematician, so you've got a tough row to hoe right off the bat to get me interested. But you did pull me in with your description of your journey into mathematics and the journey that the inventors of mathematics actually went through. I appreciated your gestures. However, as good as they were, I found that your camera angle was too low, and so many of them were lost to me. As far as the visual aspects of your speech, I would have really benefited if you had some graphics up there showing the progression, showing the symbols that you were talking about, so that I could see the progression and listen to you at the same time to enhance my understanding. But what I appreciated most about that speech was your enthusiasm for mathematics. It's clear that you love it. It came through in your body language, in the vocal variety that you used. And while it's true, I'm not a great mathematician, you make me wish that I were, Mr. Toastmaster. So that gives a flavor of how I would go about doing that evaluation. Our next guinea pig, thank you so much for being willing to step up to this. Abhijit Joshi, smell of life, smell of life. Abhijit Joshi.
What smells remind you of life? A fresh cut lawn reminds me of summer and allergy season. The fresh smell of a newborn skin makes me smile. Some people love the puppy breath. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, let me say that in addition to these smells, what if I tell you that flatulence is one of the most important smells in life? Nearly 7 years ago, I learned the true smell of life from a cardiologist. It was never I ever expected. It was January 4th, 2014. The winter was at its peak in Cleveland, Ohio, with a foot of snow everywhere. When it comes to cold, I'm such a wimp. The cold wind was too much for my Californian butt. I was visiting my future, my potential father-in-law, Charlie, at a hospital. I was trying to be at my best behavior, but it was hard. I was a little worried about Charlie. As I walked into the hospital door, the wind came out of my sails. As I was standing beside Charlie's bed, his cardiologist, Dr. Brian, walked in. His stethoscope was thumping on his chest. He shook my hands and locked his eyes with Charlie and asked, "Did you experience any flatulence?" Flatulence. I'd never heard that word before. It was not in the graduate record examination word list. I didn't know what it meant. Charlie responded. Dr. Brian tried again. "Did you experience any wind flutter?" Wind flutter. What kind of a question is that? I've seen butterflies flutter, never wind flutter. Charlie, no reaction. I could now see from Dr. Brian's face that he was getting worried and concerned. He tried again. "Did you pass any gas?" Now I'm confused. Instead of asking Charlie, how is he doing? How is he feeling? How is his pain? Dr. Brian is asking, "Did you pass any gas?" It was going beyond my logic. I gave up. Charlie responded. I could now see from Dr. Brian's face that he was relieved. My curiosity piqued. I needed to know the answer to the question. As soon as Dr. Bryan was done with Charlie and exiting the recovery room, I ran towards him and yelled, Dr. Bryan, Dr. Bryan! Yes, Abby. Dr. Bryan, why on earth would you ask anyone about flatulence? What an insane question to ask. Charlie just had a heart surgery yesterday. Do you realize that it is an incredibly personal question? I would not ask my best friend about it. Abhi, one of the most vital things of being alive is the ability to wind flutter. If there is no wind flutter, there is something wrong with the bodily functions and we need to act immediately. I was stunned. People make such a big deal about wind flutter, but all for the wrong reasons. Flatulence is life, the smell of life. The cardiologist said so. I decided to break the shackles, break wind, and let the wind flutter. What about you? Do you control the wind flutter to the detriment of being alive? Do you care when you walk in the room? I have a request. Be audacious and let it go. And when you do, proclaim that it is a smell of life. Or be even bolder. Trap your spouse under the sheet one night and scream, smell the nectar. Your wind flutter just means that you are alive with a beating heart and excited to see them. Your wind flutter just means that you expect the smells of life as healthy bodily functions. Now we can expand the definition of smells of life to include a fresh cut lawn, the fresh smell of a newborn skin, the puppy breath, and the smell of wind flutter. Sir Toastmaster.
Thank you, Avi. On the plus side, I appreciated your facial expressions in particular. Your body language was fairly effective. I thought that you used the Zoom window well. As far as what I heard, I enjoyed the way you started with the various smells of life, eventually got to the smell most associated with me. The voices were easy to follow, and I appreciated the voice of the doctor in particular as he was asking his question. On the negative side, mostly what I heard, what I would give as feedback here, it's not enough to just memorize, because you definitely have this speech memorized really well, but you have to memorize it so completely that it becomes conversational again. A lot of people stop just with memorization and they don't push it all the way forward. And again, you want to be able to make a mistake and recover so smoothly that no one would ever notice that you had made a mistake or left out a word or something along that line. In particular, I found it difficult to connect with the emotion that you were expressing in your speech with the emotion that I was expecting to feel at that point. I can't believe that you would actually run screaming down the hall in a hospital to catch up with the doctor. That would be something possibly illegal, certainly disrespectful to the patients who are in there. So I couldn't believe that aspect of the speech, and it sort of pulled me out and took away from the emotional connection that I might have felt. All right, so how would I assemble this into a evaluation? I would start off by saying how much I appreciate the idea that I should not hold back my wind flutter for the detriment of being alive. And that's the one takeaway most important to me in your speech. I enjoyed the way you started with the different smells of life and the characterizations that you had in your speech, particularly your facial expressions and your gestures, your use of staging. However, while physically I was intrigued by your speech, I struggled some with what I was hearing, because it seemed to me that your vocal interpretation didn't always match the emotion that you were trying to convey as well as your physicality did. And then I would come back to the fact that I think it's that you had an important message that you delivered well. It's nice to know that it would be acceptable for me to Dutch oven my wife sometime in the future. And I will definitely keep your words in mind every time I eat a burrito going forward. And one more time, let's bring up my friend Declan Shalvey. Declan Shalvey, the Rock. Declan Shalvey, the Rock.
Carl Jung coined the phrase introvert and extrovert, and he described those in terms of the source of energy. For introverts, the source of energy is within. Introverts like to think, but they need time at the end of the day to recharge their batteries. On the other hand, extroverts love to be with other people. They are gregarious by nature, and in my opinion, they are fun to be with. So let's take a moment here, silently, to think about how you are in this spectrum. Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? Now, fellow Toastmasters and guests, if you have said here that you are an introvert solely or that you are an extrovert solely, you are probably living in an institution, a mental institution, or you should be. The reality is that for most of us on the human spectrum, we are somewhere on that grid. It's only a question of bias. Now, I grew up in Ireland, one of 7 kids, but more than that, I am the single introvert in a sea of extroverts. And when we as kids would gather around the kitchen table, my siblings would debate vociferously and eloquently on multiple topics. I would sit there silently, thinking, agreeing, disagreeing, here. At that table, in that family, I had no voice. Now, cast forward a number of decades, in the early years of my marriage to my current wife. She was a party animal. Every weekend there was at least one party on a Friday or a Saturday night. We would go in there, she would find her friends, and after 15 minutes, I'd come find her and I'd say, there is not one single individual in this entire room who has anything remotely interesting to say. Can we leave now? And over time, this really frustrated her. She said to me at one stage, she said, if I had intended to marry a rock, I might have chosen a different rock. A nice, shiny, smooth rock that didn't have those edges that you have. Beyond that, she said, when you're standing in front of another individual, Declan, and you are not speaking, that is not a conversation. And then she said, you need to change. Now, again, good introvert, I said, let me think about that. And I did. And so began my journey to become a better communicator over 30 years ago. Of course, it happened at work. I led teams, I was part of teams. I started making presentations internally to customers, etc. And it was an exceptionally painful way to learn. In 2014, I stepped into Saratoga's Toastmasters as a guest on a Saturday morning. After 2 hours, I knew where I needed to be, where I wanted to be, and where I absolutely should be. Very shortly after that meeting, I joined 2 other clubs. In the first year, I made some 40 speeches. After 2 months in Toastmasters, I entered into Tall Tales, got all the way to the district finals. 2 years later, I got to the district finals of table topics, my personal nemesis in Toastmasters. Now, over the years, I think I've learned a number of things, but the most radical changes for me personally are in the area of vocal variety and body movement, those non-verbal techniques that help you be a better communicator. I discovered that I was a decent storyteller, but what really surprised me was then I was able to take those storytelling techniques that I'd learned in Toastmasters into the professional world. I'm an engineer in startup companies, and I talk to investors and VCs all the time. And I was able to begin the meetings with describing the team and talking about the ideation and the people that helped us in our ecosystem and why we were here to talk to these investors at this stage of our lives. I would say that Toastmasters has helped me experiment, to learn different techniques, to try things. I failed multiple times, but I will say to you with sincerity that every single speech I've made in Toastmasters, my evaluators have told me something useful. And today will be no exception. I will hear some feedback that's very useful from Dennis. No pressure, Dennis. I believe that in all of us, there is a basic need to relate to and to communicate with other human beings. When we need to tell our stories, stories about our lives, stories about our love, stories about our difficulties, our tragedies, our families, our loves, our failures, Toastmasters gives us a platform to tell those stories very effectively, with authenticity, with candor, with humility, with love, with confidence. Now let me take you back to my family situation. Memorial Day last year, 2019, our adult children were around, and my wife was telling the story about the rock for the nth time. My children have loved that story as children, and they love it as adults. It varies, by the way, from year to year. But at one stage, one of my children came to my defense. I love that child. She said, "Mom, isn't it amazing and wonderful that he made that effort to be a better communicator because you asked him to?" And in truth, my wife said, yes. Yes, I really appreciate the effort he has made and the results that he has achieved. But then she paused and said, sometimes, just sometimes, I miss the rock. Back to you, Dennis.
You've thrown me quite a challenge, Declan. I'm embarrassed to say that I have plenty of stuff over here in the plus column. Only one item over here in the areas for improvement, and it's very minor. So you've shamed me here. And the things that I liked about your visual stuff, I thought that your camera was well placed, your gestures were easy to follow, that you moved with purpose. And I'll come back and talk about your organic gestures, which I thought were very good. You began by talking about introversion versus extroversion. I don't know that followed all the way through your speech, except for the very end where you talked about missing the rock. But I did appreciate your characterization. A lot of people aren't aware that people like myself and you can be introverts and still be Toastmasters who are able to speak to large groups of people. I enjoyed your pacing throughout the speech, rushing it at some times, slowing down at others, great use of pauses. And I found your speech to be inspiring. So the only area for improvement I saw is that there was a level of intensity throughout your speech that you were able to maintain all the way through, but that level of intensity didn't give you an opportunity to go to a higher level of intensity as you were making your final points. And as a result, I was just waiting for that chance for everybody to take a breath out there. But instead, you kept us right at the edge of our seats. I'm reminded of the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a scene where Indiana Jones, I'm sorry, it's Marilyn, is actually the captive of the Nazis. And the Nazi comes in and he pulls out this wooden device, and it's very threatening. The music is very ominous, but it turns out it's just a hanger, and he hangs his coat up. And so the entire audience goes, whew, and has that relaxation. But then starting at that moment, there is not a let up in the action for 45 minutes as built through a series of increasingly stressful situations for Indiana Jones and Marilyn. And so that's the sort of thing that you have to incorporate into a speech every now and again, is a chance to relax. That's the only area that I would have for improvement of this very excellent speech. So I would begin by talking about my appreciation for your differentiation between introverts and extroverts, and how it plays well for people like you and me, understanding that there are also extroverted Toastmasters who can get up and give a speech and then spend the rest of the night dancing with everyone. People like you and I, we want to give our speech, but walking through the crowd afterward is actually really draining, and we need to get back to our hotel room and take a nap. So I appreciate that. I, again, really appreciated your camera placement, your use of the stage. Your gestures were very organic, and what I mean by that is some people will script their speech and then script their gestures as well, and say, this is where I'm going to make a fist, and this is where I'm going to pound. But I believe that every one of your gestures, whether you planned it or not, came off as completely natural, completely organic. That's not something that you can practice for. What you do is you practice giving your speech, and if you find a gesture that works, you say, oh, I like that, I'm going to keep it. But it doesn't come from something that you thought out in advance. It's something that you discover and retain. There you are. The only feedback I would give you is on the level of intensity. You were able to maintain it throughout, but as a result, we weren't able to relax at any point. And without that dynamic tension, it doesn't let us focus on what is the most important aspect of your speech. But I found you very inspiring, and thank you so much for being willing to give me something that was so difficult to comment on today.
Thank you, Dennis. I have about 5 or 6 questions. Okay, the first question I had, which is really a structural one, Dennis, around how we should provide feedback. The question is, would it be better if we put all of the things we liked in the positive column, or went through the positive column first, then when it comes to the negatives, we transition to that, go through those. So we're not going back and forth, and that might be a little bit confusing. What's your opinion on that structure versus what you have presented?
Everyone gets to choose their own structure. I happen to prefer the sandwich method. I like to start with 2 things that they did well, try to find one that is going to transition into something that could be improved, so that it just, in terms of arranging the speech, it makes for a smoother transition. So I'll look for something that has to do with what I heard, something that I saw. If there's improvement in something I saw, I'll transition over to that and come back to something having to do with the emotional impact of the speech, something along that line. Then I like to finish with what they did best of all. I find that to be most encouraging and most pleasant way to end the speech at that point. I understand that some people say, let's do the positive column, let's do the negative column, but that obviously means that you end on a negative note at the end of your evaluation and at the end of your summation.
Great, Dennis. Thank you for that. We just wanted to exercise your opinion there. I'm going to move through the questions quickly. Let's say, for instance, a speaker doesn't quite get their message across. Dennis, should we then focus on the content of the speech, or should we allocate some time for the content and that notional thing about the messaging in this case, and also deal with the delivery? What's your thought on that?
When we're talking about offering improvements, you have to look at the long haul. So again, you don't have to give a laundry list of everything that was wrong with the speech. And you look at the level of the speaker. If they're fairly new, then you want to go with some of the basics and talk about one, at most two things that they could improve upon. When you're dealing with a very experienced speaker like yourself, that's why I said I had to go into nuances where we talk about the intensity and giving us the opportunity to relax. That's not something I would ever tell somebody on their icebreaker, for example. So you want to choose, is it the content that's most important today, or is it the delivery that's most important? Choose one or the other, and don't feel you have to pack it all into your evaluation. You can always talk to them afterward.
And basically what you've said earlier as well, it'll be guided by the speech objectives and what the speaker is trying to achieve, right. I suspect. One questioner wanted to hear a little bit more about memorization versus a conversational tone or a spontaneity feeling. Just talk a little bit. What should we do if we're advanced speakers or if we're hoping to become advanced speakers? How should we deal with that?
We always want to sound conversational, don't we? We want to be smooth. We want to be clean. But the problem is if you haven't written something out completely, then you can't edit it. And if you can't edit your speech, then you're not going to have all the marvelous turns of phrase that you would if you'd had more time to work on it. It's like, it's attributed to Mark Twain. I'm sure someone else said it, but if I'd had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. So it's crucial, I think, to write things down. Usually I start with a bullet list of my points, flesh it out to a complete script, rehearse with the script, then go back to the bullet points. It's, as I was suggesting to Avi, it's not memorizing until you're able to recite it rote, memorizing until you're able to just say it, and it comes out naturally again. That's a further level of rehearsal.
Great. A question on dialect and pronunciation, and the notion is that perhaps the pronunciations are different. How much should we focus on that in terms of the evaluation, pointing out those nuances, Dennis?
That's a really good question. I mentioned for people for whom English is not their first language. In the case of Avi's speech, for example, when he used to say cardiologist, I couldn't understand the word at all. And so I'd be sitting there thinking, what did he say? Meanwhile, he's gone on with his speech and I'm missing the content. So that's the time when I give feedback and say, well, it's really important that you pronounce this word properly. You really threw me aside. However, let's face it, there are many accents, there are many ways of phrasing things that are unique to non-Englishers that are really charming. And you don't want to destroy that. I enjoy the exotic flavor, the charm of someone for whom English is not their first language. So it requires a balance. And you just want to be sure that you're addressing things where it makes a difference in terms of understanding, as opposed to taking away their own unique style of speaking.
I have one question that I'm so delighted to ask and so thankful that I don't have to answer, Dennis. When we're evaluating women, for example, should we take that into account, or should we ignore gender and maybe just focus on personality? What do you think?
I'm not even sure at this point that it's politically correct to discuss the work of Deborah Tannen. She wrote a book about 30 years ago. It's called You Just Don't Understand: Men and Women in Conversation. And one thing she points out is men tend to get upset and focus on problems and situations, whereas women, at the time she wrote it, she said women tend to focus on relationships. And where men and women can get into conflict is where a man is being very vocal about his opposition to a project, or in the case of giving an evaluation, really talking about how something was could have been much better, and they were thrown off by this method of delivery, by the vocal variety, etc. And it can come off sometimes as criticizing the person as opposed to criticizing the delivery. And you have to be careful, men and women, when a man is criticizing the delivery, and really trying to focus on that. And it can be taken personally by a woman. So you want to watch the body language of the person to whom you're giving the evaluation, and be sure that if you see some distress, if you see that you're causing them to feel uncomfortable, that you come back in and say, of course, this all comes from a place of love. We're all trying to work together and all trying to give each other support.
Great, Dennis. Just thanks for, in many ways, actually, during your seminar, heightening our sensitivity towards delivering an evaluation that doesn't offend or doesn't negate itself and the value you're trying to impart to somebody else by some style or some culturally inappropriate or gender inappropriate. It's really good advice.
And let me just point out, anyone who has ever had the opportunity to see you, Declan, give an evaluation, you are especially good at being sensitive to the feelings of the person you're evaluating. And it's something that I've learned from and appreciate in you.
The only exception to that, Dennis, is if the speaker is from England. And then there are, of course, there's no sensitivities appropriate.
No.
Maybe some tactical questions. Will you share, can we share the notes of that you made and presented here as part of the notes of this session? That might be helpful to people who are following along and making their own notes, if they could have access to your observations in writing.
I'll see what I can do. I don't know if I can show this. Yes, I can. Okay. I actually take shorthand. And so my notes, you may have noticed I had to puzzle through occasionally to get through, but I'll try and take it out of the shorthand and just give a summary.
Great. That, I think, essentially summarizes the questions that I have seen in the chat now. Let me just bring this, at least from my perspective as Toastmaster, to a close. Dennis, I want to thank you sincerely. As I said at the outset, I think what appeals to me most about you is that you have studied the art, you have studied the science, and your generosity is extraordinary because you're willing to share what you have learned, in some ways, I suspect, the hard way, and that we all can benefit from that. So I think I want to say, on behalf of everybody on this call, a heartfelt thank you for sharing your insights, many times your wit, and of course your wisdom.
Declan is my mentor at the Saratoga Toastmasters. To me, he's always affable, sagacious, and accommodating. He's a contributor to the Revelation program, even in the very early stage. Teamwork makes dream work. Thank you, Raji, for the opening, a really neat and buoyant opening. And we actually have 5 tech assistants today. Arkana Brett Swasi from TGIF Management Toastmasters, and Sushmita and Kiran from Scumbat Toastmasters. Thank you for all the contribution to this amazing workshop. Please help me give a round of applause to all the contributors, especially to the presenter, Dennis. With that, please help me welcome the speaker for the Art of Humor next Saturday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. by the District 4 Humorous Speech Champion in 2016, Jack. Jack, please.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, next week I will be putting on a workshop on humor. Now, why should you come to this? Because I believe that the best speakers in the world are the ones that have had to struggle the most. A few years back, I started taking boxing lessons, and my coach was this genetic freak. And every time I would not perform, he would tell me, "Oh, you need to punch faster." And then some days I would just not perform as well because I didn't get enough sleep. I'd tell him, I didn't sleep enough, and then he'd tell me, "Well, you need to sleep faster." He wasn't always just a bad guy. He wasn't the best coach in the world because everything came natural to him. He didn't have to struggle. Now, I have had to struggle a lot in Toastmasters. And I'm also not a naturally funny guy, but I am an engineer. I've figured out ways to be funny. And in my workshop, I will walk you through all the techniques that I came up with in order to add more humor to your speeches. As a matter of fact, I can promise you that this will be the most technical workshop on joke writing that you'll ever see. And I can also promise you that of all the workshops that the Toastmaster Revelation program has had, mine will easily be in the top 5. Even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, I want everyone to spend the rest of your day relaxing, calm down, and remind everyone that you don't need fun to have alcohol. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Okay, thank you, Jack. I have just input the URL for this workshop. Please now mark, indicate your attendance for the workshop, because in the future, we may have a limitation. The limitation for the turnout, maybe we only allowed 100 participants for each workshop. And today, guess what? We have got 125 participants. This is a milestone for the Revelation program. I feel really, really excited. I fully enjoyed the whole workshop with every fiber of my being. I hope you have the similar feeling. As the founder of the Revelation program, I officially announced that the meeting is adjourned. For members, my friends, you can stay here asking questions, more questions, and giving feedback to me, to Declan, to Dennis, to our team. Yeah, any questions, any feedback, we can communicate here. Sure, you can give me feedback by my email. I just input it here, highheartfirst@gmail.com.
My question is, how do you go from acting your speech to being conversational? And I've asked this question before, many times before, and I get the answer of you really have to have it memorized. But beyond that, what do I have to do?
Yes, Dennis?
And once again, it's not enough to memorize it. You've got to internalize it, is really what it is. There are some stories you probably already tell that you can just rattle it off anytime you like, and it's because you've told the story many times, and it is something that is part of your personal tribal oral history, that you just love telling the story. If you want to create a speech that's going to have that same impact, you have to deliver it again and again and again to as many audiences as you possibly can. And every time you give speech, or tell a story, I should say, I'm just reading a great, well, it's called The Great Courses, dealing with the art of storytelling. She talks about the dynamic between the storyteller, the story, and the audience, and how all three of them work together. So you never actually tell a story in isolation. It's the feedback that you get from the audience. And if you see them laughing at a particular aspect of the story, you're going to spend more time on that and embellish it a little bit. Or if you see that you're kind of losing them, then you'll move quickly past that point. So you never tell a story really the same way twice. Even if you're giving it to the same audience, they're going to have a different reaction the next time you do it. That's why just telling the story as many times as you can and as many venues as you can to practice is going to give you that the quality that you're looking for, is where the story just flows easily, and what you're doing is adjusting it to meet the needs of the audience.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. You can also input your question in the chat box or just speak up directly. Yes, Becky, unmute yourself, please.
Okay, that's not going to help me be heard, is it? Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful workshop. Thank you for putting this together, everyone that was involved. And I just wanted to point out or ask a question, Dennis. I love how you're talking about internalizing the speech. I years ago used to try to memorize and then it would sound stilted. And now going on Zoom, I'm using notes around, and I am trying to get off of my training wheels with notes. And so I can just always be looking at the camera. And I love how I saw that you were really connecting, and Declan as well. I'm just going to use him as an example, last speaker. Just really looking at the, so I'm just curious, for 5 to 7 minute speech, what's a typical amount of practice time might you be doing to, or is it the number of times, like you were just saying, that you give a speech where you just become so comfortable with the material?
I think a fair number is 10 times. Now, let me ask you, how obvious was it that I was reading that entire presentation?
I knew you were doing it because I'm also, for my profession, I'm a trainer. So I kind of know, but it was done really well. I mean, I felt connected with you and the material. So
that's really kind of what I'm going for here, is that we are in the Zoom world. And so it's completely different. If I were in a, if I were delivering a workshop such as this live, then I would definitely memorize different pieces. I'd have a sheet of notes, but it would be bullet points just to remind me not to miss a particular point. And then I'd sort of talk around it. It certainly wouldn't be as smooth and glib as I'm able to be. But since we live in a Zoom world, I've got my script right underneath the camera, as close as it can possibly be. And I read, but I try to be cognizant of the camera. And I'm working on my Zoom presentation skills, and I will be doing so probably until the end of next summer, when we can all meet in person again, and I'll work on those skills. But these Zoom skills are not going to go away anytime soon. I think that there has been a transformation in the way we interact in business and in Toastmasters as well. So I'm going to be rusty, I'll admit it, when it comes time to go back to speaking in person. But I'm not worried about developing those skills right now. I know that I'll be able to get them back.
Yeah, it's just getting back into that routine again. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Bob, do you have any comments or any question or any suggestions for the workshop, or for Dennis or Declan or me?
Not overall. I just was one thing about the point of memorization. I agree with Dennis entirely in terms of internalization. However, I might suggest that if you're trying to memorize a speech, really pay a lot of attention to your opening and your closing, and then just a few bullet points in the middle. Because if you nail your opening and you nail your closing, you can mix the middle pieces around no problem, and most of the time it's not going to have any impact on your speech at all. So if you find yourself pressed for time or whatever, really focusing on the opening and closing could be a little bit of a shortcut to memorizing your speech.
Let me absolutely agree with you here. If we're talking about the 5 to 7 minute speech that you're giving in your Toastmasters Club, it's a one-time speech. That's all that you're worried about. Absolutely, you must memorize the introduction, the transitions between each section, and memorize the conclusion. Have those rock solid. You can say any damn thing you want in between those elements, and people will completely forget it if you're solid on the intro and the conclusion, and the transitions are helpful. At my stage, I am working toward being a TED Talk speaker. I am working on being an international speech contest speaker. So I like to put the effort in on every one of my speeches to be able to deliver it in the manner that I'm talking about. But let me add on to that though. I don't hesitate to do the same speech repeatedly in Toastmasters as long as it fits the lesson. So I'll give the same speech. I did this just the other day. I gave it in the morning and I attributed it to use of visual aids. I gave it at noon, and in that case I was attributing it to use of humor, storytelling to connect. In both cases, that's what I was doing in the speech, but I got evaluations on different things. It's really a shame, in fact, that we do speeches only one time and think that we're done with them in Toastmasters. We should feel great about rehearsing the same speech again and again to continually improve.
Okay, thank you. Liz has a question relating to contest, evaluation contests, I believe. Yes, please, Liz.
Hi, I just want to take advantage of this opportunity to have such an acclaimed contest winner on the line. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that you do to prepare that's different. I mean, I think this is a really great framework. It's kind of like the the I guess meat and potatoes of a good evaluation, but I don't know if there's any like pro insider tips of things that you do maybe tangential to just the act of giving evaluations in Toastmasters meetings that helps you prepare, or is something that can, you know, also give impact during evaluations at a contest level.
Something that I used to do, and it was much easier when we had the manuals.
Mm.
Well, actually, back when I was competing, they didn't have the rule where you had to have the specific sheet. So I would bring in my own form. It had the grid that I use already on there, but I also had the first 10 lessons in the competent communication book. And then when I would deliver the evaluation, I would say, as we learned in lesson 5, your body speaks, you have to use your gestures in order to, etc. So anytime you're doing an evaluation at the contest level, if you can refer back to the lessons and pathways, then you're showing that you're applying the information from the materials that you've learned, and that you're showing off your Toastmasters street cred at that point.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Kat Nguyen, I believe you have a question. You can speak up directly.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Gavin. My tips about general, any tips for calming nerves? I think I've gotten to the point where gathering the content is something that has improved, but even when I'm confident in the content, I still get a lot of nerves and start to forget how to make a complete sentence once I get up there and have to give the evaluation itself.
Okay. To start with, I am never nervous. I was never nervous giving this presentation today. Why am I never nervous? Because I work so hard on my presentations that actually delivering it is a delight. Oh, I'm so glad I'll finally be done with this thing, etc. So by preparing a lot, you actually work up your muscles to the point that when you get into the contest, oh, that's the easy part. You've done all the hard work before. But you're talking about the butterflies and the jitters that come on you as you're about to do the
And
contest.
since it's an evaluation contest, I've had only, you know, the 5 minutes of notes.
Oh, right. So before the contest, something that Harry Blackstone, the magician, used to do before every show, he would go backstage to a dark corner and he would bounce on his the balls of his feet. He'd lift his heels up and he would psych himself up and he'd say, this is going to be the best show ever. These people have paid money to see me. I'm going to go out there and amaze them. I'm going to dazzle them. They're going to love me and I'm going to love them back. One thing about Toastmasters, it doesn't matter if you're in your club or at a contest, no one is sitting out there in the audience hoping that you blow it. When you're giving a speech, they don't hope that you're boring. When you're giving your evaluation, they don't hope that you're stupid. They hope that you're brilliant. And they will give you all of the positive vibes that it takes to be good. So you shouldn't be nervous about how you're going to be received. You're going to be received well. So the most important thing then is to focus on the content and focus on the speaker's needs, how you're going to help them. The more you can do that, the less likely you're going to have those nerves that we were talking about. Again, it's being speaker focused as opposed to focused on yourself. But if you're still nervous, make fists with your toes. Now, if you're standing up, you can root yourself by grabbing onto the floor. And I recommend being barefoot. I'm barefoot right now. Fists with your toes, put all the energy down there, and that leaves your hands to be free and move smoothly. So throw all the energy down there.
Thank you very much.
Cynthia, do you have any comments?
I really enjoyed the workshop. Thank you so much, Dennis. These workshops are really wonderful, and I think the value they provide to everyone has been just great. Since it's in addition to what we learn in Toastmasters, I don't have any additional questions. I think you answered everything Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. I've noticed Declan was trying to say something, right? Declan, please.
I was going to talk about the question from Kat. So I agree, whether there's a physical thing like standing on your toes, I actually take deep breaths, and I think that helps me a lot. But the other point, Kat, I want to emphasize, because it works for me, is if you think about the structure that Dennis offered you to help you analyze the speech into what you liked and what you think could be different, done differently, and think of the opening and closing. And when I have a structure like that, it relieves my stress, because then I just put in bullets on the positive side, bullets on the negative side. I think of a warm opening and a summary conclusion. Because if you look, for instance, in an evaluation contest, the judges' ballot will tell you the weightings the judges place on it. So that once I have a process, Kat, then I just populate the chart. And for me, it's stress relief. So try that. Maybe that will help you. I don't know. Now, of course, I could recommend some chemistry solutions for relaxation, but I probably shouldn't talk about that today.
Okay, thank you, Declan. Bob also offered a tip, making fists with your toes. Yeah.
Around Christmas time, if you make fists with your toes, you'll find that it does help with the jet lag.
Any other comments or feedback or even criticism for the team?
I will make this comment.
Sure.
This workshop came from a conversation I had with Gavin 2 weeks ago, where he threw the gauntlet down at me and said, hey, why don't you do a workshop about how you would evaluate an advanced speaker? I had never thought of it. And I didn't want to do it. I had to do another presentation this morning. And so it's strange that I would want to do 2 presentations in one day. But the timing of it before the contest was really important. And so Gavin, twisted my arm until I was willing to step up. And I was really amazed at what I learned in preparing this evaluation workshop, thinking through why I do the things that I do. And so I'm very grateful to you, Gavin, and everyone else should be, because we had a great workshop based on your suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for your generosity and your contribution to each of us, I believe. For me, I truly enjoyed every second of the whole workshop, since I have delivered 127 evaluations this year so far. So I kind of have a deep sense of what you're sharing, you're talking, and that makes a huge difference. If I haven't done these evaluations, maybe I couldn't understand them fully, or just know, oh, this is another tip, but I couldn't sense it and couldn't internalize it. But I have done that, so I fully enjoy every bit of the workshop. Declan, do you have any comment?
No, I think the workshop, the point about teaching is that teaching makes you as a teacher, Dennis has referred to this, dig a little bit deeper. Because if you're going to stand in front of an audience and present yourself as an expert,
which I did not,
then you have to know and understand your content maybe a little bit better. Think around the periphery, at the boundaries of it, and be able to articulate, whatever you've learned in a way that's comprehensible to a broad-based audience. Teaching is a tough thing to do. So when we teach and when we do these seminars or workshops, Gavin, frankly, we learn a lot, as well as hopefully the audience. So it's a win-win game for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Declan, for the mentoring. Abji, do you have any comments for the quality of this workshop, the organization, and the team? Yes, Abji, please.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was, I think it contributed for me a lot. I'm learning a lot. So thank you so much for putting this together.
I appreciate your hard work and the team's hard work too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The team, we have 6 area directors in Division D, and we will write series of books based on the workshops. For instance, today's workshop will be one chapter under the category of evaluation, because we will have more evaluation workshops. So far, we focus on online connection, humor, evaluation, and persuasion. The 4 dimensions of communication. Maybe in the future, we will add one more dimension, but maybe only one more. And then we just keep upgrading, refining the program.
I think, Gavin, if you could learn to speak with an Irish accent, I would really appreciate that. I think it would enhance your communication skills. And, and by the way, I am not available to coach you.
Okay.
But I'd love to introduce you to my mother-in-law.
Okay, thank you, Declan. This is the platform for you to freely communicate with the speaker, with the team, and or with me about anything you think we can work on or improve in the future. Arkana, as one of the tech assistants, how do you think of this workshop? Any comments or places for improvement?
Kevin, I really enjoyed the total evaluation meetup here, and I learned a lot from here. And the way you managed it and how you put all us together to manage it, it has all went with a flow, I would say. And thanks for organizing, and I have signed up for all your future meetups. And thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
Let's keep in mind, Gavin, that we actually finished all of the business of the presentation right at the top. Everybody was free to go, but we have this advantage of this Zoom world where if people want to hang out, we still have 23 people here, half an hour after, 40 minutes after the presentation ended. There's no reason not to.
Sure. Thank you. So Swati, do you have any comment as one of the tech assistants, also as a speaker? A Toastmaster.
Sure. This was a great session, and this was my first one attending the Toastmasters Revelation program. And I found it really informative, and I love the structure of this program. It was not like a regular Toastmasters meeting, but it still had the vibes that we get from every Toastmaster meeting. So, and it was great to learn from experienced speakers that will really help people like me who are like somewhere in between in the journey of Toastmasters. There was a lot of useful information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Swati. One of my favorite parts of this workshop is after the speaker delivery, the transition before Dennis offered the evaluation. It's thrilling, and I would imagine the process, the space on Dennis' mind. This is one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, when you proposed it, I thought that it would be fun because I immediately thought it's not going to be like I come out and give a smooth, polished evaluation, but I actually get to walk people through my thought process. That was cool.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. I would just like to say I joined this late, but it was on my calendar weeks ahead, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to attend. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go and get what I need to get. And that's exactly what I got. It was like seeing the masters unplugged for just a moment, coming off of the platform, yet remaining on the platform. And just like Dennis just said, getting inside his head and seeing his thought process of how he's able to deliver such immaculate evaluations on. I've seen him do speeches from storytelling to informative to humorous, and I'm like, he does it with such ease. Today I got to hear just a little bit of how he thinks through that. It was priceless. Evaluations is something that I want to really master. I've been in Toastmasters for 3 years, but I haven't been as engaging as I have this year as a first-time area director. And I think it's because my background as customer relations and customer service training, I stay in the trainer mode. And it's different from speaking. I always want to inform people of something, and then I was going over time in speeches. And when I would get feedback, it was like, oh, wow, Annette, you did a great job. You do so well in front of the camera. You make it seem so effortless. And my evaluations were not helping me. So I thought, well, maybe if I better understood how to give evaluations, then maybe I could help me when they gave me evaluations. Today, I heard from the masters. Thank you so much. And I look forward to more of these workshops in the future.
Okay, thank you, Anita, for the comment. Actually, I have made a decision. The decision is 3 a.m. each morning, because I just get up at 3 a.m. each morning. The first thing for me is to watch this video recording for the following 100 days, because I think there's a lot of more for me to digest, to comprehend, to apply in my evaluations for Toastmasters, my work, my life. Yeah, this is my determination.
I want to respond to one thing too, Anita.
Yes.
You talked about the fact that you weren't getting helpful evaluations from the other members of your club. One of the nice things about the compassionate candor, where you're loving and everyone knows you're on their side, but you're giving them real direct feedback. When you start giving that direct feedback, people like Declan, when I gave him direct feedback, he says, I've got to retaliate on Dennis because Dennis is evil. And so he started giving me more direct feedback. And this is what happens in the club. When you raise the bar and you elevate the quality of the evaluations that you're doing, other people are going to follow suit, if only to make you feel bad. No. They're going to say, oh, is that what we do here? We give really helpful evaluations? Well, I can do that too. And everybody in the club then improves. And when the tide goes up, all boats rise. That's what we want.
You know, my thought on this, actually I was chatting to Bob Golino. He may or may not be still on this call. About a year ago, I was doing an evaluation, preparing for an evaluation workshop myself, delivering it in Saratoga. And we were chatting about it, and we were in multiple clubs. And Bob just happened to say casually that the best Toastmaster clubs are the clubs that deliver the best evaluations. Bob, you're still here, so I'm quoting. And I think that's true. That's the point. I mean, Dennis, you've said it. I've said it, I think, as well in this meeting. Evaluations are the engine of learning for Toastmasters. That almost instantaneous feedback that is honest, that is speaker focused, that has integrity, that is focused entirely on making the speaker better. There is no other forum in life where we have this opportunity. And it's a shame. I think, Dennis, in many ways you're saying it's a shame if we don't take advantage of it. So the best evaluations are this is the way you get better.
Jasmine, do you have any last comments?
Yes. Well, on one part, actually, is Anita still here? I was also one of the ones who joined late, but really happy that I decided to still come here, even though I was like terribly late. This is a great lesson. I'm learning a lot, and especially as someone who just recently returning back to Toastmaster after a very long break. My intention is, well, my focus is more about how do I make my first icebreaker and this and that, but obviously knowing the evaluation process, having a peek into how the best what are the best ways, the best practice in this process definitely will help me, to keep things in mind when I practice and, prepare for my future speeches that's yet to come. So very happy that I made this time to come to this session, and this was actually something I was looking forward to. So sorry I didn't make the beginning, but I'm really happy to see the rest of the content and discussion. Love to be here. Thank you everyone for the effort to put this together.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Actually, Dennis also had another workshop about how to win the club and the district level evaluation contest. I just put the URL here. You can also watch it. It's very beneficial because so far, 5 evaluation winners in different level, maybe quarter, final, semi-final. They just told me they won the first place because of the help of this workshop. And it's about 800 views in about 1 month. 800 views. That's a miracle, right? Okay, it's 3:49 p.m. That's really amazing. I feel transformed to a different space. Avatar, my avatar is here, like Bob emphasized again and again. So let's call it a day. I will upload the video onto YouTube, and I will also update the information on our Meetup homepage. You can access the video there on our Meetup. So let's call it a day. Thank you again for Dennis, for Declan, and all participants. Thank you and have a great day.
Gavin, once more, thank you for suggesting the workshop. Thank you for arranging the work. Thank you for doing everything.
Okay, thank you. And just as I said, I will watch the video recording at least 100 times and starting tomorrow 3 p.m. every day, 100 days. Watch it, reflect.
Gavin, would it be impudent of me to suggest that if I watch that at night, it might help me, last thing at night, it might cure my insomnia? Do you think that might help?
For me, because in the morning, it can get me more prepared for the whole day.
We're just trying to solve a different problem. Hey, Gavin, great job. I'm going to exit. Thank you very much for doing that. It's just amazing. What you do is amazing.
Thank you, Declan. I really appreciate all your contribution. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
I'm just happy to know that I'm not the only person who's going to be watching this every day for 100 days.
Okay. You will also watch your workshop again and again.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about losing your mind is you watch these things. You go, did I say that? Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. I'll see you soon.
Okay. See you and take care. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Sure. Thank you. Bye.